A man who photographs the dead is drawn out to a village plagued by the ghosts of its inhabitants. Can he solve the mystery and save them in time?
Postmortem is a Hungarian ghost story. It takes place in a small village just after the Spanish flu and the First World War. Today we'll recap and review the events of this film, so let's check it out.
An army charges across a minefield as shells and landmines explode around them. During the chaos, a soldier called Thomas is blasted into the air and thrown onto his back. He sees visions of a young girl calling his name in a daze. In the aftermath of the battle, soldiers collect the dead, and an officer collects Thomas from an open grave, seeing if he is still alive. 6 months later, Thomas is working at a post-mortem photo booth. A little girl who has been sneaking around the market comes into Thomas's booth and asks him if she'll take a photo of him. As she leaves, Thomas appears to see the look of the woman from his battlefield vision on her. Thomas speaks with an old man. He plans to go to a village where many people have died from the Spanish flu to take photos and maybe seek out the woman from his vision. On his carriage, he speaks with the locals. The little girl who visited him is there also. Arriving at the atmospheric, misty village, he finds it quiet and uninviting, with a frosty mist hanging in the air. Joska, a friendly villager, takes him to Marx's home, who lets him stay with her. Later, Anna, the little girl who's going into the forest, so he asks to follow her for some company. She's on her way to visit the local graveyard, and when they arrive, she walks around naming all of the graves as he smokes. At night, a sound draws him to his window. As he goes to inspect, he hears the front door creak open. By gaslight, he checks the darkness of the home, looking for something that could be causing the strange moans and thumping he keeps hearing.
The atmosphere here is great. There's a little bit of over-the-top music to scare us, and of course the dim gas light providing just enough light for Thomas to see in front of him.
He follows the thumping into the attic but finds nothing, and as he drops back down, the attic door slams shut behind him. As he turns into sleep, we see the shape of a strange, long-limbed ghost standing over him. The following morning, Joska takes him to his deceased sister's home, which he will use as his studio to photograph the dead, and he learns more about the villagers he's met and shows Joska a portfolio of his works. Thomas sets up the bodies for his photos in a montage. We see him manipulating them into place and propping them up. Sometimes the living relatives are present in the pictures. He applies makeup to them and covers up any gruesome injuries, such as a man with a disfigured neck who looks like he hung himself.
This is an expertly done montage. It shows the skillful attitude that Thomas takes to handling dead bodies. Maybe his experience in the Great War has desensitized him to death.
Thomas watches Anna speak with a little boy called Lasia, who's forced to wear a cloth mask by his mother to protect him from the flu. He takes it off to joke with her, but his mom storms over and puts it back on before pulling him away. Thomas develops his photos in a dark room, but is surprised to find all of them are ruined by a dark figure in the background of each one. He tries to understand where this shape came from the following morning when a scream drags him from his work. The villagers rush to a smoky cottage and find a man who seems to have hung himself in his fireplace. Cracking open the wall to release him, we see the pained, disfigured face of his corpse as water drips from all the walls. Later, Anna visits him at Marx's, and suddenly the furniture and photos begin to move violently as some unseen spirit torments them. She runs from home and begs Thomas to leave their cursed village. He shows the strange photos to Marxa and tries to get her to tell him what she knows. She says that the war took many young boys away and the Spanish flu even more. The ground was frozen and they were unable to bury any of the bodies. She too tells him to leave. That night, Thomas awakes to find himself floating above his bed as if held by unseen arms. It seems he's had enough, and Anna watches him saddling up his horses to leave. She chases after him to stop him, but he's already gone. He sets up a campfire to rest for the night, but is plagued by nightmares of Anna being pulled into the air and manipulated by spirits. To Anna's surprise, Thomas returns to Marx's the next day and promise they will solve this mystery. To start their investigation, they come to the school to inquire about what's happening in the village. The teacher, Aunt Kirsten, talks about how this all seemed to begin when winter started. She mentions her encounters with a seemingly malignant spirit and the strange happenings around her home. They climb into the open attic of another home and find another chimney broken open with splatters of blood all over it. Then, a sudden wheezing sound, and the whole room shakes violently. They both run from the house. Another woman they visit with says she has experienced the ghosts there for many months. Thomas asks if they've ever spoken to her, and she says yes, but they don't speak with human voices. She tells them to visit Jutka, the wife of the hanged man. At Jutka's house, she talks about how she saw a ghost of a man sitting at her table as clearly as she sees them. His head melted into his body and water poured from the walls. They ask to look around the house, and Thomas tries to contact any spirits, but there is no response. As they leave the basement, the door slams shut, trapping Anna in the basement and dragging Thomas into his chair. Tibor, Jutka's husband, screams from his photo, and he and Thomas seem to switch places as Anna is pulled into the air by unseen spirits before this attack subsides. Anna and Thomas visit a barn housing several dead bodies. Although Thomas wants to try and contact them, he thinks they only appear to be hurting people to try and get their attention. Exposing the photos he took of the bodies, he finds the presence of many dark figures in all the photos. A rumbling shakes the room, and a screaming face appears in the water he uses to expose the photos. Later, he and Anna rig a setup to capture a spirit. They arrange bells around the bodies and scatter the ground with dust so they can see spirits. He also rigs up a phonograph to record sound if a spirit triggers it. As they wait for ghosts, they tell each other about themselves, and they both discover that they had nearly experienced death. Thomas on the battlefield, and Anna when she was born very ill.
They light a row of torches leading to the barn, and so the stage is set for a classic, atmospheric nighttime visit from unseen spirits.
Meanwhile, Lucia leaves his home and uses the ropes around the village to get around. A sudden wind sweeps past him and through the village, blowing out the torches outside the church. Thumping and banging come from around Anna and Thomas, and the bells ring. The movement in the barn causes the camera flashes to trigger. Still following the ropes, Lucia finds they now lead out of the village and into a patch of deep darkness. The rope snaps from his hand and is pulled into the shadows, and he runs screaming. He is dragged away by his feet, screaming into the darkness, and thrown repeatedly against the wall of a building. Anna falls into the bodies of the dead that appear to come to life. Thomas is unable to help as an unseen force manipulates him. Suddenly, the torment stops, and all the torches outside the church come back to life. They both venture outside into the gloom. There is no one there, no footsteps on the roof after all the thumping and running. He goes back inside to get his camera, and to his horror, all the bodies have been rearranged in a macabre tableau as if they are in a photograph.
Now this is a really nice jump scare. It comes out of nowhere, it's inventive, and it still keeps with the photography theme of the movie.
Anna comes back in, and all the bodies drop to the floor as if the invisible strings holding them are cut at once. Anna pleads with the spirits to tell her what they want, but they offer no reply. Exposing their photos the next day, they see the images of spirits crowding the room in every photo. Anna plays back the sounds recorded on the phonograph. They seem to be asking to be taken to their graves, even calling out Thomas's name. Anna announces to the village that they have captured images of the ghosts and are trying to figure out what the restless spirits want. A photo with a black mark leads them to Anna's home, where they meet her Aunt Carestis, a stroke patient who cannot speak. Thomas turns the photo upside down and sees the black mark may instead be leading them to another home. They arrive to find Lucia and his family's dead bodies sitting around their table. Lucia's eyes are missing and his face is horrific. The villagers enter, and shocked by what they see, they blame Thomas. Joska is dragged away outside the house by a spirit and towards Anna's home, past her aunt, who seems to spring to life and convulse. Joska is banged against the ceiling over and over before being dragged through it as the hole closes behind him. The village is thrown into chaos, and the people scream in terror. As a procession marches down, pleading for the spirit to leave them, the man leading the procession is dragged into the air and choked to death. Suddenly, several villagers are dragged into the air and tossed around like toys. Meanwhile, Carestus and Lycia's body make their way toward the chaos. The villagers retreat inside the church, while Lycia, possessed by the demon who torments them, slowly tracks them before floating into the air and telling them they will all lose their souls before falling to the floor. Thomas realizes Anna is trapped outside, begs to be let out to help her. He runs out, but she's not there. Instead, he finds her in the barn floating silently above the bodies. She is pulled around and dragged along the floor as they attempt to save her. Thomas realizes that the ghosts need someone who has nearly experienced death like him. Anna and her aunt are the ones they are most drawn to, so the spirits pull Anna towards her aunt, who lies convulsing in her home. He tells them to bring all the dead bodies into the room with them. As the bodies are gathered, the whole home rumbles and the walls crack. It appears to sink into the ground, offering the bodies the graves they have demanded throughout the film. The bodies convulse and writhe as Thomas attempts to get Anna out of the building in time. Finally, he succeeds, but he is too late to save himself and the building sinks into the ground. Thomas is trapped in the home as the walls begin to pour water and the walls crack. Outside, a villager throws a torch on the thatched roof and it begins to burn. Outside, the bodies that didn't make it into the house burn and spring to life.
Fully submerged underwater, Thomas is attacked by Aunt Carestes. He swims upwards and has barely enough room to get his head out before being dragged back under by her, before she suddenly goes limp.
Thomas finds himself in a large building surrounded by the bodies of people he has photographed while his limp body floats in the water. Led by Marska, the villagers bundle rope together in an attempt to climb through the roof and save Thomas. She dives in with the ropes while others hold it from outside. She finds his body and ties the knot around his legs as the others try to pull him to safety. They save him, but he is still stuck in his vision. Anna pleads with him to wake up, but in his vision, he is gently raised upwards by an angelic version of Anna and towards the afterlife. He fights back, though, and sputtering, he springs to life. The church bells ring, and we see Thomas is ready to leave. He shares a wordless goodbye with Marska, and Anna follows behind. He pulls her up onto the horse. With no aunt left, he has decided to take her into his care. They ride on horseback across misty, beautiful landscapes away and find another village from which they hear distant screams. Another problem for them to put right.
There's nothing quite like a good period ghost story, and Postmortem ticks all the boxes while bringing its own special flavor. It captures the feel of the time and the Hungarian village perfectly. The cold and isolation of the setting can be felt through the screen. The interesting aspect of bringing a photographer in as the savior and not a spirit medium is a refreshing change. His relationship with Anna is beautifully played and full of loving chemistry. The movie starts slowly and quietly, and it gradually descends into all-out chaos until at the climax, we understand how gripping, natural, and deserved this movie really is. Please subscribe to our channel to be notified when we upload, and don't forget to suggest movies that you want us to recap in the future in the comments down below.